Well, I actually wrote a note about this today a little bit, and it kind of yes, and I'm 63, so just to let you know, I'm 63, so I've got a few years past 50. Um, but I wrote a note today about time and how time is really the only currency that we can't earn back. So you lose time and it's gone. And I would tell my younger self, I think, to appreciate that a little bit more, to appreciate, be a better guardian of my time. Um, I I went to law school and undergrad, and I was always very, I guess, competitive, but mostly competitive with myself. And I always wanted to be the best I could be. I'm still that way to a great extent, but what I've learned is that it you can't give everything to your work, and that you have to take time for the people that you love, and you have to take time for yourself, and it's okay to not be everything to everybody all the time. And if that means something's gotta suffer, I think that sort of maybe the career path is what you should give up rather than personal relationships and things like that. And when I was probably somewhere in my 50s, I was a partner at my law firm. I was a litigator, so that involves a lot of busy, high pressure, court, kinds of things. And then there was the partnership end of things and the politics associated with that. And I really just got to the point where I I was so miserable. I was just so miserable. And my mother was getting older. And so I said, I'm gonna resign from the partnership. And originally, I was gonna resign from my firm altogether, but they said, "Well, you don't have to do that." And so so I stayed in a capacity, a different capacity, but what I did was I was able to spend time with my mom. We lived in different states, and so it involved traveling, and I didn't feel like in my situation I could take that time and spend time with her. And so I was able to do that, and it's one of those things that I've never I've never looked back on that and said, "Gee, I wish I wouldn't have done that." But I think if I had gone the other direction, if I had said, "Well, I'm making great money and I'm successful and I'm, at the top of my game here," and if I just continued down that path, I would have I would have regretted it. I would have regretted not having been able to spend that time with my mom, and it was so wonderful, and I was able to be there for her when I have siblings, and none of them really could be, and some of them live there, and I was actually able to be there more for my mom than they were, and it was a gift. It was a gift to me.
That's wonderful, and I can so much relate to that because, my former career was a pastor, which meant I did the whole, you know, undergrad degree and then straight to graduate school, which, to get a master's of divinity degree, which is a hilarious name. Obviously, no human can master divinity, right? But anyway, so that was another 4-year program, including an internship and so forth. And then I was a pastor, and that is also a very demanding job, not to the extent of the crazy hours of other lawyers I've spoken with, but just emotionally, in terms of you never know when the next crisis will happen, and I'll be, rushing to the bedside of a dying member or to the hospital, or planning and leading a funeral. At one point, I actually had 3 different funerals in a single day.
Mm,
Um, and just all kinds of other things that make that job especially demanding and sometimes lonely and complicated with politics within the congregation and within families where the whole family belongs to the church and all that stuff. um and so yeah, I left that career in 2020. Originally had planned to be a pastor until I retired, but it just became untenable because of all the political divisions and the hate and the overall climate in our society, which of course was also present in churches, and just things that I weren't okay with and didn't think were what Jesus wanted. Um, so yeah, so I'm now kind of patchworking multiple jobs together to survive. I do tutoring for a wonderful company called Compass Education Group, SAT and ACT exam prep tutoring um, for high school students. And then I do some freelance writing and I lead support groups and do private coaching around mental and spiritual health issues. Because I also have a lot of personal experience. When my career ended unexpectedly, I was plunged into a very deep depression and have recovered and am eager to help other people who are feeling utterly hopeless about life and themselves feel
Mhm.
better basically and survive these crazy times and all the horrible things that are happening, both personal struggles and world struggles. um so yeah, that is so important. And like you, I was a very high achiever, very driven person, and I didn't even realize how um tied up in my career success and other success, achievements, awards, praise, my self-esteem was until my career ended, and suddenly I just felt like I was a useless person with nothing to offer society, and realized how thoroughly, my identity and my whole sense of self-worth depended on that external praise, validation, achievement awards, scholarships, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a kind of a wake-up call, I guess. I mean, the wake-up call was with a young woman that I worked with, and it was late one night, we were going through documents, getting ready for some trial or something, and, she looked at me and she said, "You know, when I die, I don't want what people say about me at my funeral to be, 'She really worked hard.'"
Exactly.
And, I said, "That's just profound, Jackie." I mean, it because she said, "I want them to say I was a good mom or a good sister or a good, daughter or friend." But she said, "Not, she worked hard." And she said, "I feel like that's all I do." And that's kind of where I was. And it was like beating my head up against the wall. And I'm not a big journaler. I would like to be better at that. Um, but I have found in times of crisis or where I've really been trying to work through something, and it usually involves something with my job in retrospect, now I'm thinking about it, and I would just sit and write. I would just whatever came into my head about it, and I would just sit there and write and write and write. And right before I made this decision to leave the partnership, I had done that, and I kept it. And I don't know if that's a healthy thing or not because I go back and I read it a couple of times,
Hmm.
and it's I look at it and I think, "Oh my god, I was I was just miserable. I was so miserable." I don't know if it's a good reminder or if I should just I think it was on Substack. I saw somebody said that they took all their journals and they burned them, and that was sort of like a release or
Right.
catharsis. So I was like, maybe maybe I should take this and just burn it, you know? But it kind of is it's a good revisit, I guess, sometimes to just see that if I needed some kind of an acknowledgement that that was the right thing there was no doubt. There's absolutely no doubt that that was a toxic situation for me. Um,
Yeah.
and that I could even stay in the same work. I mean, it's a different work environment because I restructured everything and did some other things, but I'm still at the same law firm,
Right.
and I don't have any problem with the law firm per se. It was just everything that was going on. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. And as far as the journaling goes, I am very much an avid journaler, and my mental health suffers greatly when I don't journal first thing every morning. And also at night, I do a different kind of journaling. And in my Zoom spiritual support group, I do one week's session is on spiritual journaling,
mhm,
and So, but I understand what you're saying because I have a whole collection of journals as well from the last few years. And um, part of me, it can be depressing to go back through them and see like how often I wrote about, how miserable I was, like you said. But the flip side is that I can also go back to that, and on days when I'm feeling now like, I haven't made that much progress, I'm still the same old messed up person, go back and look at that stuff and say, "Oh yeah, I have. I'm so much in a better place now."
Oh, yeah. And, the thing about it is it always gets me to a solution. It always gets me to some clarity, and decision that if I just put, not to be gross, but I always talk about it just like vomiting words on a page. If I just sit there and whatever comes into my head and I'm just writing it, writing it, writing without really even thinking about what I'm writing down, it's just whatever is coming in is going out through the pen. And it really I've made some pretty big decisions that way, and like I said, I don't think in any of those situations I've ever said, I think I should have done something differently. Not that it would do any good anyway, right?
Right. But yeah, I agree. It definitely helps bring clarity. And for me, it also, like you use the word vomiting, I use the word venting, but it's just like spewing out onto the page so it gets out of my head and I have a little bit more distance from it and can process it without being overwhelmed by the emotions.
Right, yeah,
So yeah,
and it's
I'm a
gotta be
huge
a pen and paper, gotta be a pen and paper,
yes, I
and I've
agree.
gotta
Typing
write
on the computer is not the same.
and I gotta write longhand,
Yes.
I know, it's just something about the flow. I
Hmm.
for some that came up, I think it's in something one day, and I've gotten to be friends. That's one of the things I love about Substack is that, um, it's like meeting you, I've kinda think I met you through notes originally, like, that, I
Yeah.
might have liked some of your notes or, something, and I did another young woman, who is a journaler, that's what she does, and I met her, and she does some lovely, journaling prompts and things like that, and I think I'd probably be able I should try to start journaling again. I just can't get in the habit of doing it.
Yeah, I mean, any new habit is challenging to stick to no matter how much you want to. I think I've been able to stick with it because, like I said, I can tell the difference on the days that I don't start my morning with journaling, that the
Mhm.
rest of the day is just off and I'm in a worse mood and I get less accomplished and all the rest. Um, and mine also started when I was in the midst of that severe depression and trying to emerge from it and starting to recover. Um, so, in the mornings is just my, vent everything onto the page journaling. And in the evenings, um, I write 5 things that I accomplished that day. And they can be very little things like when I was super depressed, I got out of bed and took a shower or I got dressed, um, and now, it's, I did a load of laundry, did the dishes, I wrote this article, I whatever, tutored, etc. But I've also learned to include in my accomplishments things like I went for a walk in the park, I took a nap, I read a novel, and realized that those are accomplishments too. And they're also the kinds of things that enable me to accomplish the other stuff I want to.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
so I do that first, and then I write 5 things that I'm grateful for. So first one is always my husband, and then the other four are like specific things from that day as much as possible. So they're unique. And it can be a pretty flower I saw, a piece of chocolate cake I loved eating, whatever. But it just really helps shift my mind away from, whatever horrible thing I experienced, heard about, read about that day to, yeah, but these good things are still happening too. Um,
Yeah, that's
and
a
then
great way
most
to end the day, to go to sleep, to think about,
yes,
the good things.
exactly. End on a positive note. And so then the most important part of the evening journaling is the rest of the page is writing affirmations about myself that I honestly believe. Like I was never a fan of the what I call toxic positivity affirmations like if you believe it, you can achieve it and you're wonderful. And, for me, it has to be specific and it has to be something I truly believe. So I write qualities about myself that I admire, like I am honest, I am smart, I am kind, whatever, it might be for that day. And that has helped immensely. And when I first started it, I struggled to come up with a single thing I liked about myself when I was super depressed. But now it's just kind of automatic and easy to write a whole long list of things.
Yeah. And that's okay. It's kinda like like you were saying about reading a book or, that all those things are accomplishments and they're things that are important to do. And again, when you get so involved with the whole, like, work, and constantly doing, that was one of the things that another thing that really bothered me was there were times when I felt like I didn't know what to do unless I was working. Like, I don't have
Yes.
any hobbies or, it's like, because all I do is work. I did read. I've always read,
Mhm.
as much as I can. But it was like, I almost don't know what to do with myself. So, and that's sad.
It is very sad.
So yeah, to kind of step away from that, and I know people, I work with people like that. Like there's a guy, he just turned 90 in January, love him to death, worked with him a lot, but the man wouldn't know what to do if he didn't go into the office every day. And I'm thinking, to have that be your whole life, really.
Yes.
I mean, yeah, he does other things, but it's like he wants to go to the office every single day. That's who he is. He's a lawyer, he's a litigator, and he's gonna be that until, he draws his last breath. So, um, but it's like, that is not me. That's never been me. I never was aspired to, like, work for my
Yeah.
as an attorney for my
Mhm.
entire life, till I, like, did it. I was always kinda looking at the end, it's like, "Okay, when's a good jumping off point?" Of course, I've been jumping off for about 3 years now. This year, I finally said, "This is gonna be it." But, they just keep reeling me back in, but I've told them that this is definitely the end, so
Yeah, it is a challenge because our society so much encourages and rewards workaholism.
Right.
It's one of the few addictions that our society views as a good thing, right? Um, and also it's so easy to get caught up in basing our identity on our career. Um, I mean, think of every social conversation. What do we say? So what do you do? And what is meant by that is, what is your paid work? Um,
Exactly. What do you
and
do?
it's really sad actually that we're so focused on that and so focused on productivity. Like even though many of us now have shifted to self-employment or other non-traditional work, there's still this relentless focus on productivity and all these books and tips and everything about how to get more done and um I mean, to an extent, of course, we all want to be productive and there's some reward in feeling like we're contributing. But yeah, I'm just seeing in the chat someone posting Americans give up more vacation days every year than any other nation. And on top of that, we aren't given as many to start with as other countries are. It's just such an incredible difference. And I know people who have relocated to other countries for that reason or come to America from them and said, "Whoa, this is a totally unhealthy culture. I'm going back," you know, because
You
other
you wanna
things are
hear Yeah,
they're
it's
more
true.
just more laid back and they have longer lunch hours and paid both maternity and paternity leave and a whole slew of other things that we don't. And of course, healthcare, that's not a for-profit industry and that is available to everyone.
Yeah, well, I was gonna tell you a story because this is how bad I was, and it's the same guy I told you who goes to the office every day. He's 90 and he's gonna go until he dies. Um, but I went on vacation with to and to spend some time with my family, and we were on this lake in northern Michigan, and I started feeling really bad, but I had brought work with me. okay, because I had this brief I had to write, and it was due while I was gone, and of course I had to write it, so I haul all this stuff on a plane, it's and so, and I've got my computer and everything. Well, I got sick, I started getting sick, and I realized kind of intuitively that I think it's my appendix. And so I decided we're kinda out in the middle of nowhere and, like, probably 40 miles from the nearest doctor or hospital, and I'm thinking ruptured appendix, I don't want any of this. And I wasn't even positive that's what it was, but it just kinda felt right in terms
Mhm.
of the diagnosis. So anyway, I go to the emergency room, they look at me, they say, "Yes, you've got an appendicitis, we need to take your appendix out." So I was like, "Oh my god, I've gotta call someone before you before you do this." So I'm in on this table getting ready to go into surgery, and I get this. I know the guy's number by heart, fortunately, and I call him and I said, "Phil, I'm not going to be able to work on your brief. Um, I've got to have surgery." And I don't remember what he said, but I'm thinking to myself, I think at that point I was thinking, there's something really, really wrong with this. Like I couldn't go on vacation, and then I couldn't even have surgery without letting somebody know that I was, so yeah, I definitely it was pathological, I think, for me.
I
Uh,
remember as a child going on family vacations to the beach every year and my dad calling into the office every night. Um, I mean, during the day, he did fun things with us, but yeah, he was still tied to work. And thankfully, these were the days before cell phones and, really 24/7 work communication. But he did call in regularly while that week we were on vacation.
right. Yeah, I mean, you think of I think about that and you think about cell phones and how much better really life was without when people couldn't contact you anytime they wanted to, or you couldn't contact someone. And one night I thought I lost my cell phone. I was by myself, my husband was not with me, and he was somewhere out of town or something, and I was panicked. For one thing, I couldn't call anybody because I don't know anybody's
Exactly.
telephone number anymore. I You can't find a payphone if you need to call somebody.
Right.
Nobody has a landline anymore,
Right.
and so I'm like, you're pretty well an essential thing for you to have, and I would just couldn't find it. I didn't know, I was panicked. I was looking all over the place. I'm like, getting in the car, I thought I dropped it. Anyway, and that was another sort of wake up, like, and so I try to go places without my phone sometimes. I try to leave it behind, now as a just a when I go on a walk. If I'm particularly if I'm going by myself, I usually take my phone with me just because of a safety issue. But otherwise, I leave it at the house. I don't even put it in the car. So, because I just think it's gotten to an unhealthy point.
It has definitely gotten unhealthy for me, no question about it, because, it's such an easy distraction when my brain is spinning and like, oh, let me go on the internet or, go on Substack said notes or whatever it might, Facebook, and, take your pick. Um, but at the same time, I never leave it behind for two reasons. Number one, I am totally dependent on the Maps app to get me from point A to point B when I'm driving.
There
And
is
number two,
that.
when I spend time in nature, I do always keep my phone on do not disturb. I will not text or talk with anyone while I'm out enjoying nature, but I bring it for the camera. I love to take photos and videos of the beautiful scenery and the animals.
Yeah. Yeah, I take it on walks sometimes for that, and when I'm by myself, and then just to have it in case, I would
Yeah, a
fall and,
safety thing for
hurt
emergencies.
myself. Yeah, and then sometimes I will confess, because when I walk by myself, a lot of times I get these really great ideas, and so I I'll re I know if it's like dreaming or something. Once you get back to the
It's
car or
forgotten.
whatever,
Yep.
it's like, yeah, I don't remember what I said, so I'll just do a quick little, like, audio note. I actually thought about doing a Substack, like, note kinda thing in nature, 'cause in the summertime, I'm in the mountains in North Georgia, that's where I usually spend my summers, And, so I go on these beautiful walks and hikes and things like that, and I just thought, there's some woman who does this. She's from England, and she has a wood, she calls it a wood, but it's like a little piece of ground, I think that's just woods, and she goes out and talks in her woods, and
I have
I
done
think
that.
it's
You'll
just kinda
Several of
cool.
the videos of my Substack posts actually are videos that I have made while walking in the park. There's one with this blooming tree behind me about how I've bloomed in the last few years and helped other people bloom. And there's another one that of me like standing on a pier, so you don't see me, but you see the birds and stuff and the view in front of me, talking about how let's contribute to the world's beauty instead of its ugliness and focus on the kind, small things we can do instead of, arguing over politics or religion or whatever, or just being overwhelmed by the constant onslaught of bad news.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's another you mentioned the politics and religion, and those are very polarizing topics now.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I kind of miss, having grown, up in an era where people could have discussions about things. You can agree to disagree, and
Yes,
it just doesn't seem to be that way anymore, and it's a shame. So I have friends who, I mean, and family actually, who you just don't talk about. Those are just off limits. If you want to like maintain a friendship or you want to maintain some kind of semblance of a relationship with these people in your family, you just have to just say, we're not talking about any of that because people
absolutely.
can't
And
talk
I
about it
miss
with
it
any
too.
kind of.
Yeah, I've had those conversations with people where, I used to love debating, but it was civil debating and it was fact-based debating and it wasn't these intense emotional arguments and personal insults and all the rest. I mean, we would start, we would agree on the same basic set of facts. It was just a question of, this is how I think we should address this problem, or I think this is a bad thing and the other person thinks it's a good thing, and we talk about why, and but in a civil way, respectful way, we're still friends, etc. And yet, like you said, that's almost impossible now. And in my own family, we flat out cannot discuss either politics or religion. And it's especially ironic because most of us are Christian, although I no longer consider myself Christian. I consider myself a Jesus follower, but most of Christian teachings I've rejected now because they're just too exclusive and condemning of other people, in my opinion. But with that said, yeah, I mean, even among people raised in the same family with the same beliefs, like some of us have totally rejected those beliefs, others have doubled down on them. Um, it's just it's very difficult, and because politics and religion are now so intertwined, at least in the United States for sure, it is very hard, um, to even if you're not at all religious and have never belonged to a church or other faith community, you can't escape being affected by the beliefs of people who are and are trying to force theirs on you, basically.
Yeah, so I try to just stay away from that, and I do the same thing in my Substack. I mean, somebody posted, I think, on Notes one time about something, saying they were very upset about something that was going on in the world, and they wanted to address it in their Substack. And what do you do with these things? And what I said was, I write about health and wellness, and I don't, you know, I don't, I keep that out of that space. Not that it isn't somewhat a part of health and wellness. I mean, to a great extent, like, sort of what's affecting you externally.
Right.
But what I think doesn't matter that's not going to help you. And really, all you can do is offend someone. So I just, I stay in my lane on Substack. I just, that's what I do. And that's good for me because I don't care, what anyone else believes or thinks. I mean, when I say I don't care, it doesn't affect the way I feel about someone. I don't take it personally. I feel like, okay, you're entitled to your opinion. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. And, but I just, they get, the discussions get so ugly. Um,
They
and it's
can, for
just,
sure, and I had to
yeah,
pull back from those discussions too because, I'm very passionate about some things, And like I said, even in my own family, we can't have those discussions. But for me, it's been interesting because I've been on Substack now since early 2022, publishing every week. And at first, I was very adamant that, okay, I am not touching spirituality, religion, politics, any of that. I had written about it elsewhere and strongly expressed my opinions and cited all these facts to justify them and so forth. But I wanted my Substack to purely be about mental health. And so until like probably late last year, I stuck to that. But as more and more people that I encountered, like the major source of anxiety or depression in their lives that was affecting their mental health was what's happening politically or their own personal like questioning religious beliefs they once saw as absolute truths, but now we're really not sure about because of their own life experiences or because they realized that they were LGBTQ or a host of reasons, why their old beliefs just didn't work for them anymore. Um, or they never had those beliefs, but their close family and friends do and are trying to, tell them why they should have those beliefs too, basically. Um, a whole host of things. Anyway, long story short, I decided, okay, I do need to talk about spirituality and religion, especially since I'm a former pastor. And one of the best ways I can help people with their mental health is to acknowledge that yes, this spiritual stuff is affecting all of us, even if we're never religious, but especially if you were and you're deconstructing from that. Um, and so it started out, I actually did a subscriber survey, and one of the like 40% of my subscribers said, you know, I wanted you to address spiritual issues too. And then I led my first Zoom spiritual support group earlier this year. It's a 6-week live group for 12 people. And I'm starting another one this Sunday, assuming that I fill up all the spots. But anyway, it just was so obvious how hungry and how desperate people are for just authentic human connection and to be able to talk about what's really on their hearts and minds without fear of being condemned, attacked, mocked, all the rest. Um, so yeah, it's that balance. It's refusing to get into the, personal insults and shouting at each other part of it, but yet being able to create a safe environment to talk about those issues because they are majorly affecting a lot of people right now. And I have friends who are LGBTQ. One was literally going to flee the country, and another was physically assaulted in a grocery store in broad daylight while the person screamed slurs at them. And on top of that, when the police came, the police tried to blame her for the attack and say, "What did you do to provoke this guy? Did you come on to him?" All this stuff. Um, so that's why I realized, okay, I can't totally ignore this. But at the same time, I'm done with doing my angry rants. I want to, deal with it in a more constructive way and help people heal instead of add fuel to the fire of hate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just so hard now to because people they just can't seem to help themselves, It's just
Yeah.
like people are just so passionate both at both ends of the spectrum, and so people are kinda in the middle or whatever, which I kind of consider myself to be more of a, moderate type,
Uh-huh.
person, but I it just it there's just it's almost like there's no place,
Yes.
so I
And the media is greatly stoking the outrage, and the news is no longer just reporting facts. It's all this commentary, all this speculation that
it's editorial.
yeah, I have largely decided I'm done with any news. I literally leave the room if something political comes on. Um, and I don't want to be totally uninformed either and bury my head in the sand, but all the intricate details of some specific horrible thing that happened that I'm utterly have no ability to do anything to change or prevent from happening again. It's not in any way beneficial to me to watch that on repeat every day.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I actually find a lot of really good there are a lot of good, really political writers on Substack. I've found a lot of people who, they just report that, that and some of them are very, they come up they have stuff that you would never hear in mainstream media at all.
Yes,
So,
I agree.
I find that pretty interesting that and a lot of journalists have come to Substack
Yes,
because of sort of the toxic atmosphere in traditional journalistic, enterprises these days.
right.
So, uh,
Yeah,
so
speaking
yeah,
of that, I have to
so
give a shout out to Jed Legume of Popular Information. I don't know if he's one that you read, but um, he does a great job of like deep dive investigative reporting,
uh-huh.
which is pretty much non-existent, except for some independent media outlets now. And very carefully documented fact checking and using the Freedom of Information Act to have the original documents, so it's not just here's my opinion about this, and so said this, and on and on and on, and other scholars on Substack, like Heather Cox Richardson. She has a very clear, opinion about things, but it's not presented in a as a total emotional rant, So yeah, I agree.
Well,
There,
and she's coming from a place of opinion as opposed to people who are on, the NBC Nightly News or whatever channel, and they're coming as though they are reporting the news when in fact they are putting opinion into the news. Everything is slanted with
yeah, exactly. And
viewpoint,
even
and
people who
I don't know,
genuinely
maybe it's
try to
always
be
been that
objective,
way.
it's not possible. Yeah, we're all shaped by our life experiences, um, and a whole host of other factors. So, um, that I mean, some people are certainly better at being calm and factual than others. But this idea, I mean, even just what gets covered, let alone how it gets covered, is
Right.
biased in some way, whether intentionally or not.
Yeah. Yeah, so I just try to, get I just want the facts, and then I like to make my own decision about it.
Yes,
So but it's hard to get the fact like you were mentioning, you're not even sure you're getting the right facts, and people
exactly.
can't and that's part of the problem with discussing these things with people now, a lot of the times, is you can't even agree on the basic facts,
That's
you
exactly the
know?
problem. I think that's why we're
So it's
so
like,
polarized.
"These are
Because
my
in the
facts,
past, with
those
the
are your
civil
facts."
conversations, we all agreed on the same basic set of facts, and there were, readily accessible documents and research studies and all the rest. And there still are some of those, of course, but we agreed on the facts. We just disagreed on, what to do about them, basically.
Right.
And now, we can't even agree on basic facts. So that makes it hard then to,
Yeah.
even talk about stuff.
It definitely does. So, yeah,
So I
um
think that kind of leads us back to one way that our lives have changed as we've aged, and that is, at least for me, um, being less concerned about what other people think of my beliefs and how I choose to live my life, and less concerned about pleasing them or not offending them. I mean, not that I set out, to be vicious or anything, but just, being true to myself and honest about how I feel or what I think, and and being more willing to listen to people who have different points of view and be curious, and less judgmental. Not always. I mean, when they're clearly causing harm to other people, then it's hard to just be neutral for me. But on some things, I genuinely am curious and want to hear people's life experiences and their beliefs when they're very different from mine, and kind of understand what led them to develop those beliefs.
yeah, I'm with you on that, particularly on the not really being worried about what other people think. I used to, again, just replay things in my head that had happened about, like, what I could have said differently, or
Yes.
what did they think when I said that, or, and I've really the older I've gotten, the more I just again, to say you don't care is a little strong, but I don't worry about it. I am who I am. I say what I say. It's not perfect. It doesn't have to be. I think that's the other thing is like this perfection thing where you feel like, oh, if I would have only said that, or if I would, and a
Yes.
lot of it had to do with like things I would do in court, like I
Mhm.
go replay these things in my head. And it's so funny because you make a big deal out of things and they don't even register with other people
Right.
because I remember and again, this kind of goes back to the whole trial thing, but we had this trial and we thought we scored this like really big point with this one witness. And then after the trial was over, we were able to interview the jurors. And that was one of the things we asked them about. And they didn't even, it wasn't, and it was like, zing, we really got this. These people, it was like, what?
Mhm.
So that kind of made me think, what you think about what's going on and what other people are actually observing are two different things to begin with. And
Right.
then two, I try to tell people because I still deal with some younger lawyers and I try to impart some of the, knowledge or wisdom that I've learned over the years. I actually taught law school for a few years. But it's just like, don't be so worried about what other people think, or if they think, don't be worried that they think, "Oh, this person isn't that smart," or
Mhm.
I said, "Sometimes it helps if they think you're not that smart," you know? So
Mhm.
don't have to prove your point. I used to work with a guy who was always having to, like he talked all the time because he had to let everybody know how smart he was, and he was very smart. But it was like, listen, stop and listen to what because you're talking all the time, and so you're not learning anything from these people. So if you just stop and, like, you don't have to be, you don't have to know everything. So, yeah, I've gotten over that. I mean, there's certain things that I still, you know, generally try to look presentable when I leave the house and things like that. I mean, but I don't carry it to an extreme. But I do not worry anymore, like, if someone likes me or doesn't like me or, it's nice if everybody likes you, but not everybody likes everybody, and I'm okay with that, so
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely hard emotionally when the people who are, um, disappointed with or strongly disagree with my decisions are loved ones. But if it's some random stranger on the internet leaving some hateful comment on a post of mine or whatever, I truly don't care. And that's been very liberating. Um, I do still struggle with the comparisons and the perfectionism of, here's someone who just started their Substack 3 months ago and has thousands of subscribers, and I've been here 3 years and still only have a few hundred kind of stuff. Or the financial comparisons because I'm still struggling and they're raking in the bucks. Um, but there too, we each have our own journeys and our own things that we're passionate about. For some people, they have no problem, like writing ad copy for some company or product that they would never use and don't actually like, and get paid well to do that, or to use AI to post a lot more often and whatever it might be, things that for me, I would not be comfortable doing. And I have to remind myself, well, yes, if I did those things, I might be able to make more money too, but I am making the choice not to because that's the right choice for me. And, different things work for different people, and that's totally okay.
yeah. Yeah, it's all about personal integrity. I mean, that's always been my hallmark, is honesty and integrity,
Same
because
here.
if you don't, and it as a lawyer, I thought it was very important if people could I do what I say. I don't lie to you. I'm not gonna lie to you. If you're talking to me, I'm giving it to you straight.
Mm.
Um, and my reputation is very was and is, and I mean, that's a little different than what people think of you. I think it's more of a substantive issue as opposed to a superficial issue where, my reputation is really about who I am.
Yeah. And what
not
we think of ourselves ultimately,
right.
that's much more important than what anyone else might think. There's even that
Right.
saying, what other people think of you is none of your business. And I think that's true. And the other thing I think is true that, many of us didn't realize until we got older is that the fact is most people don't think about you at all, good or bad.
That's
They,
right.
they have their own life and their own stresses to worry about. You're not on their radar, at least not very often.
Right. So those conversations you're replaying in your head, nobody thought anything about them except for you.
Yeah.
Most people probably didn't even notice. So
Yeah.
you're not that important.
Mm. Yeah, and that's been the best thing for me about leaving my career as a pastor and doing this mental and spiritual health coaching and these Zoom support groups I lead has been that ability to not be worried that, oh no, if I say this and offend these church people, they're going to leave the church or they're going to force me out or they're going to stop um you know financially supporting the church, which means my salary will end, or be reduced, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and also, the sense of, okay, this is what Christians believe. This is what a worship service includes. Um, and reaching the point where I was like, I'm not comfortable with some of this. And also, it's so insular. Like, I didn't want to just be around other church people. I wanted to, have conversations with pagans and atheists and witches and whoever, people into tarot cards, astrology. That's all fascinating to me. Whether or not, I believe it or use it myself is irrelevant. I'm still curious about it. And I think it's wonderful that it's spiritually nurturing for other people. And so that these Zoom groups have just been amazing, that the depth of the sharing and the safety of that environment, because I do only allow 12 people and they're only live, they're not recorded. Um, and it's just so sustaining right now for so many of us who don't have, authentic communities where we feel totally safe to fully be ourselves.
Yeah, yeah, that's an important that's a that's very important, and the coaching part of it, and, um, that's a great way to put your coaching out there too through, through Substack. I've been kinda struggling with a way to do that myself, but, and I think part of it's a fear of, like, putting myself out there and what if somebody, responds? I mean, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna
And I
do
think
I'm gonna do some things. I'm gonna try some different things. I've finally got I think my legs under me with Substack, and so I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with trying to, expand kind of beyond that with maybe some workshops or some group coaching or something like that.
Yeah, I know for me, it's a mindset issue, not so much of being afraid to put myself out there, because anyone who's ever read any of my posts knows that I pretty much bear it all my mental health struggles, all, everything. But my mindset issue is that I just want to help people. If I could do all of this coaching, all of these support groups for free, I'd gladly do it, but I can't. As I said to somebody else, I can't pay my rent or buy groceries with thank you notes from grateful people. So I have to find a way to make it financially viable to be able to keep doing it, and also to, hold my own anxiety at bay about my own finances, so that I have the emotional bandwidth to support other people. So it's hard to balance those two, because, I'm very proud of the support I offer, and I very much know it's worth paying for. And I have this glowing testimonial from someone in the last Zoom group. And yet there's still that part of me that's like, there's so much of the marketing and sales world that is emotionally manipulative and uses tactics that I would not use, because they work for that's why they use them. But for me, they're still not okay. And so, yeah, it's a whole host of things, and that comes back to that honesty and integrity that we both, are so essential to who we are and who we want to be, that we're not willing to sacrifice it to make a buck.
Right, right. Yeah, that's so important, and I've never done that, whether, as a law I mean, I'm, one of these I don't wanna say it's rare, but I'm one of the lawyers who, definitely, I'm straight arrow in terms of
Yeah.
billing, telling you like it is, and so I do the same thing in my with
Mhm.
my coaching. But it is hard, the whole, like, feeling like you have to sell yourself
Yes.
to because I'm offering something that I know, like, people need,
Mhm.
like, they need it, and that would be great for 'em, and I got into it because of my mom and because of I saw her as she got older, if she'd just done more, like, physical stuff, I th
Mhm.
she woulda 'cause mentally she was great, but physically she really started to decline, and I just and, she told me as really close to when she died, she said to me, Daria, I wish I would have listened to you and done more, like,
Mhm.
exercise or, movement, stuff like that." And I felt so bad, I was like and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to be I went and got board certified as a health and wellness coach was because I wanna be able to help people, and obviously wasn't able to reach her. And as I learned more about coaching, which has a lot to do with psychology and
Yes.
motivational interviewing and all that kind of stuff, I was really approaching it the totally wrong way. And so I'm like, I wanna help I want other people to realize that before it's before it's too late.
Yeah.
And,
I've actually read
our
some
lives
of
are
your
just so much
posts.
better when we're when we feel good in our bodies. And if you don't feel good in your body, then you know, what's the point in living a long life if you feel like crap?
Yeah, and I really appreciate the posts of yours that I've read because you do bring, the science to back up your claims about how the benefits of something, but, it's not overwhelming with the technical jargon and you make it practical too and simple for someone to implement. And also, I loved your honesty about the cold plunges versus the heat because yeah, I cannot deal with cold. That's why I live in the South. And, to me, cold is like 60 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm ready for a jacket and you won't find me in shorts and a t shirt at the park. Um, and so, yeah, all the people that write about the benefits of cold plunges, um, and the polar ice club swims and all that stuff. For me, no. Like even like I'm a huge ocean lover, and the underwater world is like one of my sanctuaries. I used to live in Hawaii, so snorkeling was just like my ultimate spiritual experience. But at the same time, when I'm at other beaches, if the water's too cold, I have to kind of tiptoe in, and I can barely stand it. And if it's really cold, then I give up and don't go in. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, the
and
ocean is
and
a
heat,
different
like the saunas and stuff, I'm all about that. Those are
well,
awesome.
yeah. I can spend all kinds of time in the sauna, and I also live in the South, and I've often and I but I grew up in the Midwest, so I had cold weather, and I've spent summers in Michigan for a number of years on a spring-fed lake, which
Mhm.
is the warmest it usually I mean, it was warm if it got up to 72, okay?
Right.
It was like a heat wave in the lake, and when I was a kid, I could deal with it. I loved it. In fact, Memorial Day, the water was like 54 degrees. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go swimming. But but as I got older, the cold wasn't. So I've got a wetsuit because I like to swim. In fact,
Mhm.
swimming to me is a real meditative thing, and I really have always liked to swim, just laps, because to me it's just
Yes.
like,
Same here. I was
nothing.
actually on the
We
swim
just
team when I was a kid, and I've always been a water baby and a beach person. And yeah, there's something so healing about water.
Yeah,
And I'd much rather be in it, but when that's not possible, at least be like walking by it,
warm,
hearing a
you
waterfall,
know,
seeing one, etc.
yeah, yeah, so yeah, the cold plunge, I've been doing the face. I can do the cold one on the face. But the idea of getting into, like, a bathtub full of ice cubes or cold water just and I try it in the shower, and it's like I've taken this, like 'cause I'll get the water as hot as I can possibly stand it pretty much, and then to, like, turn on the cold water, it's like, "Okay, I've got the lever right there." It's like, "Okay, that's enough." Like, I
Yep.
turn it back to the hot,
Yep.
So, But I understand, I try to get the benefits of all the different things. And I try to do what I try to practice, at least to some degree, the things that I recommend other people do.
Yeah,
Um,
same here. And that's actually one of the benefits for me of writing and leading support groups related to mental and spiritual health is that it reminds me as I'm suggesting these practices to other people and mentioning how helpful they've been to me that, okay, did I do this today? And, like you said, I want to be not only live with integrity, but also like I know the benefits, I've experienced them.
exactly.
So of course, I want to keep doing these things because I feel so good when I do.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you feel I mean, I always feel like it'd be kind of, almost fraudulent or something if I didn't
Yes.
do the things that, I recommend people do. And I'm honest about it if I don't, or if I've tried it and it just hasn't really worked for me. Um, but I at least usually I try it. In fact, I'm doing an experiment right now that I wanna write about, at some point, but I've been drinking apple cider vinegar, and I wanted to see if it would lower my A1C over time, and I have my husband doing it too, because his was high. Mine's pretty good, but I just wanted to see if it would lower it, and, and I haven't done anything else different, so it's not like I'm not eating, any
Yeah.
sugar or anything like that. I'm gonna go get a blood test, and then I'm gonna write about my apple cider vinegar experience, and I also tried creatine, which people have just been
Yeah.
raving about, and, um, I I just used the small, the dose, they tell you the smallest dose, and I started getting, like, bloated, like, really just, like, my stomach was just and just having gastrointestinal issues from it. So I was like, "No, maybe either I need to back off of it," but I wanted to make sure that's what it was first, like, it wasn't something else, and
Right.
so I quit, and when I quit, it it went away. So it's like that's what it was. So I need to do something different. I haven't given up on that one, but I need to find a different path. And I'll probably write about that at some point too, because I think real life experiences are the things that, people like to.
Yeah. Well, we'll wrap up soon because it's been an hour, but I just wanted to see if there's anything um, in particular, like a core belief that you either held when you were younger that you've changed, or a new one that you have developed in more recent years that you, like your younger self, never would have accepted or been open to.
Well, I talked about the whole time thing and everything, but I think just a a core belief. It's just that I am an important person. My life is important, and I want to share with others myself. And in order to be able to share myself with other people, I have to look after myself. And I think that's really important. And I think when I was younger, I felt like being busy and doing, and being, successful or whatever that means. My definition of success was completely different than it is now. My definition of success was, you know, I graduated at the top of my class. I got a really good job. All that kind of stuff. And now success is about really just like living my best life and being a good person that other people want to be around. So, um,
100%. Yeah, same here. That's been, and almost every guest that I've had these conversations with has said something very similar. And especially some of us who were raised in religious environments that really emphasize, sacrificing your needs to serve other people. And of course, there are times it's good to do that, necessary, valuable not only to yourself but to other people. There are studies documenting the benefits of kindness, not just to the receiver but to the giver. But when it's taken too far, and as one of my friends says, you set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, then it's a problem,
that's
and
good. I'm gonna have to remember that.
if we can't take care of ourselves, how can we help other people take care of themselves or provide care if they're unable to, even for a brief period of time? It's caregivers are so stressed, and it's so essential for them to have, respite care, time away, no matter how devoted and loving they are. No person can 24/7 totally focus on meeting someone else's needs and ignore their own, not eat, not exercise, not sleep. So I agree. Yeah, and it's another thing that our society rewards and lifts up as admirable, is sacrificing your own needs for other people, especially for women, I think. But just as a whole, and especially within some religious traditions, including Christianity, that's held up as this great spiritual virtue, to always put other people ahead of yourself. And one of the things I always have reminded people is, Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. He didn't say instead of or at the expense of. He said as. Both halves of that equation are important. And he took time apart from the crowds to go be alone and pray. And
Right,
so,
right.
so yeah, all of that message of self care, I think, is one that some of us have to learn the hard way, because we achieve and achieve and achieve and push ourselves until we burn out and totally fall apart. And in order to live again and rebuild, recenter ourselves, be happy again, we realize, okay, that was so unhealthy. I do have to do fun things as well as work things. I do have to go to bed, get some sleep, read some novels in addition to all my self-help books, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. Yeah, I make time for the novels.
Definitely. Yeah,
Well,
I can
Wendy,
always
it's been
tell when I've read like one too many mental health serious books and it's time to read a novel.
right, right. It's like, take a break now. It's been so great talking to you. I really, really enjoyed this, and I'm so glad I got to meet you, and that we were able to Substack was able to fix the huge,
Yes,
capacity issue that we caused yesterday or the day before when we were supposed to do it, and everyone
absolutely.
wanted to
Yes.
watch.
And thank you to all who have joined us live and who may
Yeah,
watch this replay later. I am loving having these conversations and planning to do them almost exclusively instead of writing posts, because I want to have more interaction and more community building. And I'm ultimately going to be offering a membership on my Substack that will include live Zoom gatherings so we can all get to know each other and talk back and forth, because writing can be lonely. Even, there's a great community of writers on Substack and we support each other in various ways. But still, writing is basically a one-way communication channel. And then people can leave comments, of course, but it's still not the same. So that's what I'm realizing for myself. As much as I used to love to write and still do, I enjoy these video conversations, and other forms of interacting more so than just that one way communication.
yeah, it's been great. It's my first time ever doing this, so, I really enjoyed it, and I'm gonna have to do some more myself.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again for being my guest today, and to all of you listening. And we'll
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Been great.
All right. Have a good rest of your day or evening if you're somewhere in a different time zone. Those of you watching, and thanks for tuning in. And I hope you'll check out Daria's Substack and/or mine if you're not already a subscriber, and share what you got out of this conversation in the comments.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.